Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse witch, and this week's video is all about pendulums. This video topic was actually one that I was planning on doing for a long time, so I am really happy that my patrons decided that they wanted this topic. Because there is a small change now, I have a Patreon now, woo! And my patrons have an exclusive voting power when it comes to the topics of my videos. So unfortunately, I won't be asking you on the community tab on my channel or on Instagram anymore when it comes to what kinds of topics I should film videos on. Those questions will only be on Patreon from now on, otherwise it wouldn't be an exclusive voting power, and I think that would be quite unfair. Another thing that some of my patrons get, those in the 3rd tier and above, is a shout out in my videos, so that is what I will do right now. Thank you very, very much to Ash, to Shannon Marie, to Lorna Lewis and to Lucy Cummings for being my patrons. You are very much appreciated. But now let's hop into the video before the sun will be completely gone, because I'm seeing right now that my face is getting darker and darker. So as I said, this video is all about pendulums. This is a really, really cool topic because pendulums can be used for a lot of different purposes. And one of them is deity communication, which is why I actually wanted to make this video, because I get a lot of questions about how you can communicate with deities if you aren't like clairaudient or clairvoyant or anything like that. And I think a pendulum is a great tool to communicate with deities or also with other entities. So let us start with what is a pendulum. In the end, a pendulum is just some kind of chain or a string, something like that, with a weight on it. So you can see there's a chain and there is a weight on it. In this case, it's a crystal. Of course, those are 3 pendulums. This would be 1. It's a chain with a weight on it. The weight should ideally be relatively well balanced. That's why most crystal pendulums you see, they are all kind of in a cone shape, because like that they're just balanced. Otherwise that could mess with the answers of the pendulum. One question that is frequently asked is, what kind of material should the pendulum be made of? And honestly, I think that doesn't matter. As soon as you are able to connect with the pendulum, it doesn't matter if it is a crystal pendulum, if it is a bone pendulum, or stone, or metal, or whatever, really. Also the string, it can be a string, it can be a chain, whatever. As long as you can connect with it and you feel like you can work with it, it doesn't matter. The only thing I wouldn't really recommend is something like plastic, because I feel like it can't properly conduct the energy. It's kind of, I don't know, for me personally, it just feels weird. I don't like working with plastic. I also wouldn't use a wand made of plastic, for example. I personally think that natural materials always work better. And also, of course, you can make a pendulum yourself. I have seen people who just use a necklace, which I think is pretty smart because you can just carry it with you around your neck. Of course, the pendant should have quite some weight, and also it should be balanced out, as I said, but you can use a necklace. You can also just take a piece of string and tie maybe a hagstone to it, or whatever. You can make it yourself. There are like endless possibilities to make a pendulum. That's also why there are people who have more than 1 pendulum. There are people who think that you should only work with 1. There are people who work with multiple. Just as it is for tarot decks. There are people who have like 1,000,000 tarot decks, and there are people like me who only have 1 tarot deck. But for pendulums, for me personally, it's different. I just kind of connect really easily to pendulums, so basically anytime I visit a witchcraft shop, I end up buying a pendulum. That's why I personally have 3. Let me show them to you really quick. These are my 3 pendulums. They are made from black tourmaline, smoky quartz, and clear quartz. And yeah, as I said, I feel like as long as you can connect to each and every one of the pendulums, I feel like you can use multiples. And for me, it really feels like a pendulum develops its own personality, kind of. That's why for a long time I have always, before I wanted to use my pendulums, I always asked them which one of them I should use. Now that I have 3, that would probably take ages. So I just asked them for which kinds of topics I should use them. That could also be something that you would want to do if you have multiple pendulums. You could ask the pendulums for which kinds of topics they want to be used. So for example, one of my pendulums I only use for like spiritual questions, maybe for communicating with deities and stuff like that. One of my pendulums is more for like mundane stuff, and one could be for like basically anything, or maybe for emotional questions. Yeah, you can basically do whatever you like. I think I've said it multiple times now, but in my opinion, it's pretty important that you are able to connect with your pendulum. So it's completely normal if you buy a new pendulum that maybe you have to still get to know it a little bit, that it doesn't really properly work from the start. So it's completely normal that it maybe takes a couple of days, maybe, until you get to know its energy and it gets used to your own energy, until it produces like proper answers. So if you get a new pendulum and it doesn't really work out on the first day, don't be sad, don't be disappointed. Just continue connecting to it and continue getting to know it, and then it will work better with time. One way, of course, that you can do it is to just take your pendulum with you wherever you go. You could put it under your pillow when you sleep or next to your bed. You can put it on your altar, whatever you like. Okay, enough on what a pendulum is. What can you actually do with a pendulum? I think a lot of people, they only see the purpose of divination or like future prediction, which I think that's not the only thing you can use a pendulum for. I have used my pendulums for a multitude of purposes. For example, I really like using my pendulum for decision making. So as I have also touched on in multiple other videos, I always struggle with what book I should read next or what topic of witchcraft I should dive in next, because I'm bad with decision making. So I use my pendulums for that. Of course, you can use it for like divination and like future prediction, but you have to keep in mind that if you want to use a pendulum for future prediction, it will not always really accurately predict the future, because the future can change depending on what kinds of decisions you make and other people also. So it can tell you like what will probably happen if like nothing changes. But if you maybe ask the pendulum whether you will have 3 children in 20 years or something, the chances are really low that it will properly predict that. It's more used for like maybe things that will happen within the next week or the following day or something. For example, I have used my pendulum to ask what will happen on a date that I went on the next day, and that went pretty well. It was 100% accurate. Every single answer was true. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Another way you can use a pendulum is to get insight into things like your psyche or your subconscious, so you could probably also use it for shadow work. Then also, one really fun way to use a pendulum is to find things that you lost. So maybe let's say you lost something in your apartment and you're using it. Then you could use a pendulum to like guide your way to the thing that you lost. That's something that people do. I personally haven't tried it, but I think that's really fun. So maybe the next time I lose something in my apartment, I will use the pendulum to find it. And the last purpose to use a pendulum for, as I said, would be to communicate with deities, with spirits, whatever entity really. You can use it to connect with an entity and to get answers on your questions from that entity. So it's, for me personally, a really easy way to communicate with my deities. Okay, but now let's hop into the juicy stuff. How does the pendulum work? Like, it's just a weight on a piece of string or a chain, how does that like predict the future, or how does that give me answers from entities? I don't know. Let's just say that there is no scientific explanation on how a pendulum works. So what I will tell you now is like mainly just my thoughts on the topic and what I feel like happens when I use a pendulum. I feel like the pendulum helps you connect to other forces. No matter if it's maybe if you want insights on something or you want to make a decision or something, I feel like in that cases it connects me to my subconscious and just gets me access to my subconscious, which I normally could not access. I feel like it's the same way for the tarot, for example. I don't think that it like moves by itself. I think that I am actually moving it, or other forces are moving it, and that they maybe like move it through my body, through like micro movements that are just not caused by my like conscious self, but by maybe my subconscious or by other entities that I'm connecting with in that moment. So maybe if I would use the pendulum to communicate with a deity, then I feel like what happens is I am holding the pendulum, but I'm making like tiny little micro movements that make like the pendulum swing. But I feel like those are not done by my conscious self, but by the deity working through me. But you could also think maybe the deity moves it by itself. You have to really find it out for yourself, because of course, as it is with a lot of other topics in witchcraft, there is no scientific explanation for how that works. So that's just what I feel like. Now, how do I use a pendulum? There are a multitude of different ways that you can use a pendulum. I will mainly show a very easy way to use a pendulum, and also to start using pendulums. If you never have used a pendulum before, then I will show you how I personally start doing it if I would get a new pendulum, for example. That's also why I'm sitting at a desk, because I can do everything here and you can see it. So one thing that will differ from person to person, depending on what they feel like, is do you have to cleanse and consecrate the pendulum? In my opinion, you should, of course, cleanse the pendulum, because especially if it's maybe a used pendulum and another witch has used it before you, you should probably cleanse it so that it gets rid of the energy of the other person. Because as I said, if you use a pendulum, you really connect to it. You exchange energy. So probably the pendulum will be full of the energy of another person that has used it before. So cleansing, I would say yes. When it comes to consecrating, I think that just depends on whether you feel like you have, or you have to, or you should consecrate it. If you maybe consecrate your other tools, then you probably should also consecrate this tool. I mean, it is a witchcraft tool. I personally didn't. I didn't feel like I had to, so I didn't, and it still works. So I guess you don't have to consecrate it, but a lot of people like to do it, so if you like to, then consecrate it. Then comes the step that I already talked about, getting to know your pendulum by maybe just having it in your pockets while you're going around your day, just taking it with you, having it maybe on your altar so it gets used to your energies, having it next to your bed or under your pillow while you sleep, whatever really. Just trying to exchange a little bit of energy with it and getting to know it. And then we get to the actual using of the pendulum. So that is how I do it. I take it in my hand like this. I have it like with my thumb on my finger, and it just balances down there. Just hangs from my hand like that, freely. It has to swing freely. You could also maybe hold it like this. That would also be possible. I just feel like that, it just kind of hangs so freely that it's kind of shaking around and stuff. So having it like this, for me works better, because I can properly hold it. The next thing would be to hold it still. So what I usually do is I put my elbow somewhere and then I hold the pendulum. So that I make as little movements as possible. The more still I can hold it, the better. That would be the next step. Afterwards, you have to like get to know how the pendulum works or how it wants to be used. So what I mostly do is I would like take the pendulum, hold it still, and then I would ask, what does yes mean? And then I would see like what the pendulum does. Maybe it swings away from me and towards me, or it swings from left to right, or it swings in the pendulum clockwise or counterclockwise, whatever. You just have to see what does the pendulum do when I say, what does yes mean? Afterwards, you do the same with no. Of course, it would probably do something else because otherwise you couldn't differentiate between yes and no. And then you can maybe, if you want to do it, you can also ask what maybe or I don't know means. That could differ from pendulum to pendulum. For me, funnily, it's the same thing for all my pendulums. All my pendulums give me answers in the same way. For me, it's like a yes is that it swings towards me and away from me, like that. No is always left to right. Maybe is going in a circle. And I don't know, it doesn't move. When the pendulum doesn't know the answer, it just stands still. That will differ from maybe from pendulum to pendulum and most probably from person to person. So if your pendulum behaves in another way, that is totally fine. And next up, you can try it out. Does it work properly? The best thing you can do is to ask obvious questions that you know the answer to. So I would maybe ask my pendulum, is my name Bente? And then it would probably have to say yes. And I don't know, am I 30 years old? Then it would have to say no. Do I have a YouTube channel? Then it should say yes. If that works out and it says the right things, it replies correctly, perfect. Then you can now start using your pendulum. If it does not work properly and it gives wrong answers, I would honestly, it hasn't happened to me before, so I haven't tried it out, but I would personally maybe either cleanse it again, because I don't know, maybe it is still connected to someone else's energy, or I would just try to connect to it even more. Just take it with you for another like week or so and then try it again. And at some point you will have like your connection figured out and then it should work. So yeah, then you are properly set up to use the pendulum. You can now start asking yes and no questions, and you know what yes means, you know what no means, you know what maybe means, and you know what I don't know means. So feel free to then start out using your pendulum. But of course, that's not the only way you can use your pendulum for like yes and no questions. You can also use your pendulum with a like pendulum board or pendulum mat. If you, for example, look it up on Etsy, there are a like quadrillion different offers for like pendulum boards with different kinds of answers. I unfortunately don't have one myself, but they're just mats or boards that have like a circle around it, and around the circle are different kinds of answers. You can just use them like holding the pendulum in the middle and then see where the pendulum swings, and that will be the answer to the question. And I think there are even like books that only have like pendulum boards in there. And also you can make one yourself and print it out, or you can just like draw it on a piece of paper and use it like that. That is, for example, what I do for decision making. I just draw a circle on a piece of paper, and then the multiple possible answers I just write around it, and then I hold the pendulum in the middle and I see where it swings, and that will be the answer or the decision that I will make. And yeah, that's it. It really is that simple. Using a pendulum is really easy. I think personally it's the easiest divination method, because I mean, holding a pendulum and asking yes and no questions or using a pendulum board is much easier than like learning 78 tarot card meanings. I think personally the hardest thing is to connect to your pendulum, but that kind of works by itself. You just have to give it some time and then it will work. And yeah, that's it for this video. As always, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up. And if you enjoy my content, then maybe consider becoming my patron. It would be really much appreciated. And also you can, of course, follow me on Instagram to keep up with all the boring things that I do. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!